Come on. Come on. Let's work together.
So, last Sunday, I noticed that this fascinating video by Bill Nye was trending on Facebook, and I decided to respond to it in two parts. In the first part, I'm going to address Bill Nye's character, and in the second part, I'll address his so-called arguments. I think that I really should address his character first because therein lies the best explanation for where his arguments are coming from. Bill Nye strikes me as a man who is undergoing a transition between white knight and mangina. But in order to explain what I mean by that, I need to say a few things about masculinity and femininity, and I'll have much more to say about this in the future. The way I see it, there are two basic alternative ways to view masculinity and femininity. One of them is descriptive and the other is prescriptive. I have noticed this with the term human as well. Some people like to use it in a descriptive way. If your parents are human, then so are you. But others like to use the term in a prescriptive way, or as a way to talk about human virtues and vices, and also about what is attractive or admirable. And it is the same way with masculinity and femininity. The descriptive view focuses on the average differences between men and women, or boys and girls, and the other focuses on virtue and vice and how one should behave and think and live their life virtuously. The descriptive interpretation of masculinity and femininity takes all of the various ways of differentiating between the sexes and combines them and averages them all out in order to place an individual on some arbitrary scale, some single dimension, with masculinity at one end and femininity at the other end, and androgyny in the middle. The less feminine you are, the more masculine you are, and vice versa. The prescriptive interpretation, on the other hand, is where you find masculine virtues and vices, and feminine virtues and vices. It is not one-dimensional at all, and the concept of androgyny does not fit in here because androgyny is descriptive, not prescriptive. With this prescriptive interpretation, you can have many male or female role models. Being feminine doesn't make you any less masculine, and being masculine doesn't make you any less feminine. There is no need to position people on a scale of overall masculinity or femininity with this perspective. We already share this perspective to some extent. For example, we already know that having your male sex organs removed does not actually make you into a woman. And by the same token, having your female sex organs removed does not really make you into a man. We don't think of androgynous infants as men or women because we recognize that they're neither. You can have virtues from both and vices from both, and you can be both or neither. I prefer this perspective of masculinity and femininity because I find it much more useful. The problem is that when we talk about masculinity and femininity, we often don't say which of these two meanings or interpretations we have in mind, and that can create a lot of confusion. So when I say that being a weak, damaged, and dysfunctional man does make you less of a man, but that it doesn't make you more of a woman, I'm advocating for a prescriptive interpretation of masculinity and femininity. So as I said before, Bill Nye really strikes me as a man who is in transition between white knight and mangina. He's like a self-castrating male. You see, when you equate masculine virtue to male privilege, it's only natural to self-castrate. Bill Nye is lacking in male virtue. He comes across as pandering, dishonest, and cowardly. This doesn't make him feminine, though. His failure as a man really does not make him successful as a woman. I wouldn't have a problem with Bill Nye if he displayed feminine virtues. I would applaud him if he did because it's not easy for a man to display feminine virtues. It takes much more work and it's much more impressive. In a previous video, I said that manginas were feminine But when I said that, I was really coming from a descriptive view of masculinity and femininity. Now that I'm coming at this from a prescriptive perspective, I want to say that I don't really think that manginas are feminine at all. They're just broken, unmasculine males who, in spite of the damage that they cause, do deserve compassion and sympathy. Their hatred and disgust for masculine virtues comes from their hatred and disgust for all things masculine, and hence, the mangina is a man who has had his masculinity eroded by his own misandry, which he internalizes. This could be seen as a development out of the white knight role, one possible path to manginadom. It may begin as a hypocritical attack on other men in defense of women, and then it may become more principled by attacking men in general, and then eventually applying their criticisms of men and masculinity to themselves. They don't allow themselves to see anything positive about masculinity, and they become unmasculine as a result. But this does not make them more feminine. They don't gain feminine virtues in this way. They only lose their masculine virtues from this negativity, and they also gain both masculine and feminine vices. The mangina just can't seem to love women without denigrating men and masculinity, and just blaming and scapegoating men for all of the world's problems. Now don't get me wrong, Bill Nye is a very successful man in terms of money and fame, and he's somewhat accomplished as a public intellectual and a talking head. But I think that his success is largely driven by his nasty habit of pandering and his attempts to create the impression that he's an authority, a scientist, and an expert, and that therefore his opinions are automatically factual and scientific and shared by the larger scientific community. He really tries to pass himself off as a representative of the scientific community because he just doesn't have the eloquence to win an argument on his own. He needs to have this imaginary consensus on his side at all times. I really can't imagine him ever challenging a popular idea or a politically incorrect idea. He also focuses on debunking straw man arguments so that he can feel smart by comparison. I just find him to be very weak and cowardly and fake in general. And now he's weighing in on the abortion issue, which I will address in the second part.